on time for senior golfers went to play golf. And when they started, one of them said, "These hills are getting steeper every year." Another one said, "These fairways are getting longer every year." The third one said, "The sand traps are getting bigger and deeper every year." The fourth one said, "Guys, why don't you be grateful to God that you are still on top of the grass?" Complaining, eh? Anyway, the boy from nowhere is a moving TV story about two handicapped boys who are the best of friends. The story climaxes at a race in a Special Olympics held for the handicapped. The race begins and two friends are out front running neck to neck. As they near the finish line, the leader falls down. His friend, who is right behind him, stops to help him. Meanwhile, the other runners pass them by and cross the finish line. The final scene shows the two friends hobbling along, arms around each other as they cross the line, cheerful and happy. This story reminds us of God who says, "Come as far as you can, and I will come the rest of the way." Even though the boys were last in the race, they were really first in love, in mercy, generosity, and friendship. Indeed, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. In the first reading today from 2nd Isaiah, the Jewish community is in exile. In a sense, they have fallen down and they are handicapped. They lack faith. They doubt God's presence and His ability to pick them up and save them from the exile. Isaiah reminds his people not to create God in their own image and likeness. God's ways and freedom are to be trusted. He will not abandon them. He will bring them over to the finish line. Paul writes in the second reading today to the Philippians. He wrote this from prison. He senses that the end is near. His race is almost completed. Whether he likes to live or dies, he is convinced that God will be glorified. He does not know which to choose, life or death. If he chooses life, he can continue to live out his witness spirituality of peace, joy, and love. He can also be a living example of Christ for his community. On the other hand, if he chooses death, he will be freed from this life to be with Christ, for that is a far better thing. In either situation, he wants to glorify God by his life and by his death. Paul does not want to control or restrict the action of God in his life and in the life of the community. The gospel highlights the themes of God's generosity and radical freedom. It is often misunderstood, this part of the gospel. It would probably not be well received at a union meeting. All would cry, "Unfair, unfair." The workers agreed to a particular wage. Thereupon they complained to the owner, "This last group did only an hour's work, but you had put them on the same basis as us. who have worked a full day in the scorching heat. Parables such as this one disturb us because they catch us perhaps by surprise. This is not the way it is supposed to be. It is just the opposite of what we expect to happen. It is a reversal of expectation. Parables reveal to us the way that God acts. They challenge us to let God be God. We are to accept God's radical freedom, goodness, and generosity. It is envy which destroys generosity. And the heart of envy, as the advertisers well know, is comparison. We are envious because the man next to us seems to have something that we lack. Perhaps, as we heard the gospel read today, we felt sympathy for those workmen who had worked all day. The thought may even have occurred to us that we too have labored all our life in the practice of our faith, and when we compare his treatment of different laborers, God's generosity is actually very unjust. Undoubtedly, in human terms, God's generosity is unjust, for which we can only thank God. For the truth is that we depend entirely on such generosity for all that we have. The truth, in other words, is that most of us are like the workmen who were called at the 11th hour. Few of us can claim, in all honesty, to have done a heavy life's work in all the heat. The message of this parable is that we should be happy and rejoice over those who come into the vineyard. In the vineyards of God's presence. What happens, however, is that our sense of fairness, justice, and pride keeps us from realizing that all this time we have been basking in God's goodness and generosity without even perhaps think about that. Who are we to control and manipulate God? Who are we to tell him with whom he should be generous or not? In the story of the prodigal son, the message is similar. The father says to his loyal but pouting son, "Everything I have is yours. Are you going to deny me the freedom to be generous with my other son?" Only God stops in the middle of the race to help us up. How about you? Before I end, I'd like to bring again what Isaiah told us in the first reading and try to meditate on these two verses. It says, "Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call him while he is near. Let the wicked man abandon his ways, the evil man his thoughts. Let him turn to the Lord for mercy, to our God who is generous and is forgiving." So the door is open for us, How are we? Are we like those complainers all the time, like the golfers, complaining? We try to do the best with what God gave us. Are we jealous about others? Perhaps we think they are treated better than we are. We shouldn't be. God is just, and what we have, we deserve what we have. And thank God. Thank God for all He has given us. Now I'd like to end up with a short prayer. Liberating Father, free us from enslavement and self-imposed exile. You are a life giver, an exile ender, and freedom bringer. Without you we can do nothing. May we rejoice with one another when we at last discover your Son in a deeper way. Amen.